Money to burn. Chapter 1, Robbery. It is a wet afternoon in November, and the winds are strong. On a road near the river, 3 men are cutting down a tree. When the tree is down, they pull it onto the road and then go to wait behind some other trees. Their red car is near them, ready to drive away quickly. It is a small, quiet road. 100 meters away, a woman called Petra is watching the big road from the city. She is waiting for a blue security van. Next to Petra, there is a sign across the road near the river. It says, "Road closed." The strong winds push over the sign, and Petra puts it back again. Where's the security van? She thinks. Perhaps it's late, because the storm is bad. She looks along the quiet road and sees the tree, ready to stop the van. Harry and George and Andy are behind the other trees. Nothing must go wrong, thinks Petra. 2 cars slow down, ready to turn into the road by the river. Then they see the road closed sign and go on. Petra smiles. They think it's closed because of the weather, she thinks. She starts to walk up and down in the rain. Her face and hair are wet, and she is cold. Petra is not afraid, but she does not like waiting. She is 25 years old. Older than Andy, but not as old as Harry and George. Suddenly, Petra hears something. She looks along the big road and sees the blue security van coming. She quickly moves the road closed sign away. Then she runs along by the river to the other 3 men. "It's coming," she shouts. Harry is smoking a cigarette, and Petra sees him throw it in the river. George puts a hand in his coat and pulls out a gun. Andy looks at his watch. "Nearly 3 o'clock, he says. "It's late." He looks afraid. The security van is taking money to the Bank of England. The money is old and dirty banknotes. They are going to be burned. There are 2 men in the security van, one of them driving. The storm is getting worse, the driver says. The other man looks at the trees blowing in the strong wind. "I think you're right," he says. The blue van turns into the road near the river. The driver sees the tree on the road and starts to slow down. "Do you think the wind blew that tree down, Frank?" he says. "Yes," says the other man. "Stay in the van, Charlie. Perhaps I can move it." He opens the door and jumps down from the van. Then he walks across to the tree and tries to push it off the road. "It's too heavy," he shouts. Charlie opens his door and comes to help. 3 men run out from behind the trees by the road. They are carrying guns. 50 kilometers away, a girl and a boy are coming home from school on their bikes. The girl is 14 years old and her name is Zoe Harper. The boy is her brother, and his name is Mark. He is 12. They are going along a small road between 2 lines of trees. It is difficult trying to stay on the bikes in the strong wind. "I don't like storms," shouts Zoe. Mark does not hear her. All he hears is the wind. The two children live on a farm, 2 kilometers from their school. Usually it does not take very long to get home, but the storm is making them late. It is 3:30. They turn a corner and see the farm. A light is on in the farmhouse. Zoe sees her mother by the kitchen window, but her father is outside. He is trying to put up a fence, but the wind is blowing it down again. "Let's help Dad," says Zoe, getting off her bike. They put their bikes inside the old barn. When they come out again, they see a tree begin to come down near the fence. "Dad," shouts Zoe. "Look out." She sees her father start to move away, but he is too late. The tree comes down on him. Zoe runs across from the barn. She hears her mother come out of the house shouting, "Ted! Ted!" Mark is running now. Mr. Harper tries to push the tree away, and his wife and children help him. There is blood on his face. "My arm," he shouts when they pull the tree off him. "Did the tree break your arm?" says Mrs. Harper. "Yes, I think it did," says her husband. They help him walk to the house and they all go into the kitchen. "You must go to the hospital, Ted," says Mrs. Harper. She washes the blood off his face. "I can drive you." "Okay," says Mr. Harper. He looks out of the window. Driving is dangerous in this weather. "The children can stay here," says Mrs. Harper. "Jean is coming soon." Jean Fisher is a friend. She is coming to stay with the Harper family. "Yes, we can stay here," says Zoe. "We're not afraid." Mark looks at her. He is afraid, thinks Zoe, but is not telling Mum. New words of Chapter 1. Cutting down equals cause to fall by cutting. Push over equals to cause to fall. Pull out equals starts moving onto a road. Banknote equals a piece of printed paper. Getting off equals to leave a place. Barn equals a large building in which animals are kept. Lookout equals to be careful. Chapter 2. £500,000. The rain is heavy and it is difficult to see along the road. The red car moves slowly. The 3 men are inside. The woman is driving. She is trying to see through the rain. "Can't you go faster?" says George. He is sitting in the front next to Petra. "No, I can't," says Petra. "The rain's getting worse every minute." "We have to get to London," says George. "I don't like this," says Petra. "There's a lot of water on the road. It's difficult to drive." "Perhaps it's better on the smaller roads," says Andy from the back seat. Petra turns off the big road, but there is more water on the smaller road. "It's flooded," she says. The car moves very slowly through the water. "We must find a place to stop." The men say nothing for a minute, then Harry says, "Yeah, Petra's right. We can't get to London today." "Where can we stop?" asks George. "I don't know," says Petra. George looks at his watch, then puts the car radio on. And he's coming from America next week, says a woman on the radio. There was a robbery near Portsmouth at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Some men put a tree on the road and stopped a security van. They took £500,000 in banknotes, old and dirty banknotes, to be burned at the Bank of England. The police are looking for 3 men and a woman in a red car. They have guns and are dangerous. The weather is getting worse. Many roads are flooded, and police are asking drivers to stay at home. £500,000, says Andy. We're rich. Yeah, and all old banknotes, says Harry. He is thinking about the 4 large black bags in the back of the car. I always liked old things, he says, laughing. The police know the color of this car, says George. We're going to have to get a different one. And we're going to have to find a place to stop, says Petra. Driving is dangerous in this weather. Where are we? Asks Andy. At the farm. Zoe hears the phone. She goes to answer it. Hello, she says. Is that Zoe? Says the woman on the phone. This is Jean Fisher. Can I speak to your mum? Mum's at the hospital with Dad, says Zoe. Dad had an accident. What happened? Asks Jean Fisher. Zoe tells her about the tree and her dad's arm. They're coming back later, she says. Are you coming soon? No, says Jean Fisher. I phoned to tell you. The weather is bad and the roads are flooded. I can't get to the farm today. Zoe is looking at Mark. He is watching her speak into the phone. What am I going to tell him? She thinks. When he hears that Jean Fisher can't come, he's going to be afraid. When are you coming? She asks Jean Fisher. Tomorrow, says the woman. When the weather is better. Okay, see you then, says Zoe. She puts down the phone. Who was that? Asks Mark. Jean Fisher, says Zoe. Is she coming soon? He asks. She's going to be a little late, says Zoe. New words of Chapter 2. Turn off equals to leave the road you are traveling. Get to equals to have an opportunity to do something. Be afraid equals to be frightened. Put down equals to put an object that you are holding onto the floor or onto another surface. Chapter 3. The robbers arrive. Look over there, a kilometer or 2 across the fields, says George. A house. Petra and the others look across the flooded fields. Petra sees a light in a window. It's a farmhouse, she says. There's a light. Somebody's there. That's okay, laughs Andy. They're going to be pleased to see us. Yeah, says Harry. And perhaps they've got some food. I'm hungry. We're all hungry, says George. We can have something to eat and stay there tonight. Petra turns the car into the next road and goes down to the farm. Zoe and Mark are watching the TV. A man is talking about a robbery from a security van. £500,000, says Mark. That's a lot of money. And all of it old banknotes, to be burned. How exciting. It happened near Portsmouth, says Zoe. That's not far from here. Where are the robbers now? Perhaps they're going to London, says Mark. It only takes 2 hours by car. The weather's bad, thinks Zoe. Perhaps they can't get to London in this storm. But she does not want Mark to be afraid, so she says nothing. Mark goes to the window and looks out. Do you think the horses are okay? He says. Brownie doesn't like storms. I forgot all about them, says Zoe. After Dad's accident, I forgot to go and see Topaz. Let's go and look now. Topaz is Zoe's horse. She likes to go across the fields and along the roads near the farm on him. Mark has a smaller horse called Brownie. They put on their coats and go outside. The wind is not so strong now and it is not raining so hard. The two of them run across to the stables, looking at the flooded fields. Did Mum and Dad get to the hospital okay? Thinks Zoe. There are 3 horses in the stables, Topaz, Brownie, and a big white horse called Mercury. Mercury is Zoe's father's horse. Hello, Topaz, says Zoe. I'm sorry I forgot about you. She pulls his ear because she knows he likes her to do this. Then she puts an arm round him and the horse moves closer to her. Is Brownie okay? She asks Mark. Yes, says Mark. Let's have a look at Mercury, says Zoe. The big white horse is pleased to see Zoe and moves across to her. Suddenly, the animal stops and turns its head to the door. What is it, Mercury? Says Zoe. Did you hear something? She listens and hears the sound of a car. Mum and Dad are back, says Mark, running across to the door of the stables. That was quick. Perhaps they didn't get through the flooded roads, says Zoe, following him. Perhaps they didn't get to the hospital. She sees the car coming down the road to the farm. That's not Dad's car. Perhaps it's Jean Fisher, says Mark. No, it's not, says Zoe. Suddenly, she is afraid. Go back into the stables, she tells Mark, pushing him in front of her. What's wrong? Asks Mark. Now he is looking afraid. I don't know, says Zoe. She watches the car get closer to the farmhouse. It is red. It stops near the house and 3 men and a woman get out. What did the man on TV say earlier? Says Zoe. A red car. Yes, it was red. And 3 men and a woman were in it, says Mark, looking afraid. They are the robbers. What are we going to do? New words of chapter 3. Coming down equals to become lower in position or value. Chapter 4. Harry and the horses. Look over there, a kilometre or 2 across the fields, says George. A house. Petra and the others look across the flooded fields. George looks at the farmhouse, then at the buildings near it. There's a barn over there, he tells Petra. Go and see if you can get the car in it. We don't want this car to be seen. Who can see it here? Says Harry. The police are looking for us, remember, says Andy. And they have helicopters, says George. Petra opens the barn doors and looks inside. There's nothing in here now, but a car was here, she shouts to the others. Perhaps everybody is out. There are lights on in the house, says Andy. Let's go and see, says George. Petra drives the car into the old barn, and the 3 men go over to the house. George takes his gun from his coat. Harry does the same and goes to the front door. George and Andy go to the back door. George and Andy go to the back door. They look through the windows, but can see nobody in the kitchen. It's all very quiet, says Andy. George opens the back door and goes inside. Is anybody here? He shouts. Look, says Andy. He sees some blood on the floor. Somebody had an accident. George goes to look. Perhaps they've gone to the hospital, he says. Perhaps they had to leave quickly. Go and let Harry in through the front door. Andy goes through to the front of the house and Petra comes in the back door. I've put the car in the barn and shut the doors, she says. There's no other car here. Nobody's here, says George. We think they've gone to the hospital. He shows Petra the blood. Somebody had an accident. There's a tree down over near the fence, Petra tells him. Perhaps somebody was under it. Harry comes from the front of the house. Andy's gone to look in the other rooms, he says. There's nobody in the barn, but there are stables outside, says Petra. Go and look round them, Harry, says George. I don't like horses, says Harry. Do it. George tells him. Okay, says Harry, and he goes out of the back door. What about the money? Asks Petra.
It can stay in the car, says George. We can get it after we've had something to eat. Let's find some food. The two of them start opening cupboards.
Mark is watching from the doors of the stables. He sees Harry come out of the house. Somebody's coming, he says, moving back from the door. It's one of the men. I can see him, says Zoe quietly, looking over his head. The horses have heard somebody coming, too. They are moving around and making sounds. Zoe goes over to them, Mark following her. Be quiet. Zoe tells Topaz, but the horse doesn't listen to her. What can we do? Mark says. The man is going to find us. Zoe thinks for a minute, then she says, get down on the floor, Topaz. She hits him on the back, and the horse sits down on the floor of the stables. Get down on the floor behind Topaz, she tells Mark. Quickly. Mark sits down on the floor and Zoe gets down next to him. Don't move, Zoe tells her brother. They can't see us from the door. She puts a hand on her horse. And please don't get up, Topaz. We don't want the man to find us in here. A minute later, Harry comes into the stables. Topaz gives a little jump, but he doesn't stand up. Harry is afraid. He doesn't like animals, and he doesn't like to be near horses. He is afraid of them. He lights a cigarette with his lighter and looks round the stables, standing near the door. I'm not going in there, he says quietly. There's nobody in the place, only horses. I can see that from here. The big white horse comes across to him. Harry moves away quickly. Get back, he tells the horse. Go away. The horse is getting closer and closer. Harry quickly shuts the door of the stables and runs back to the house. New words of Chapter 4. Cupboard equals a piece of furniture. Go over equals to examine, or look at something in a careful, or detailed way. Chapter 5. The helicopter. When everything is quiet again, Mark and Zoe get up from the floor. It's lucky he doesn't like horses, says Zoe. What can we do now? Asks Mark. We must get the police, says his sister. But the phone is in the house, says Mark. We can't use it. We must do something, says Zoe. Where did they put the car? In the barn. Yes, says Mark. Why, perhaps there's a phone in the car, says Zoe. Perhaps there is, says Mark. Let's go and see. No, you stay here, says Zoe. I can go. I don't want them to catch me and you. Okay, says Mark. But be careful. Zoe looks round the door of the stables and sees Harry going back inside the house. She sees the men and the woman in the kitchen. They are taking food from the cupboards and putting it on the table. Zoe is angry. That's our food they're taking. She thinks. She is going out of the door when she puts her foot on something. Something small and hard on the floor. Zoe looks down. It is a lighter, but her father and mother don't smoke. That man used it to light a cigarette, she thinks. It's dangerous to light cigarettes in stables. It can start a fire. She picks up the lighter and puts it in her jeans. Zoe moves carefully along the outside of the stables. She looks across to the house, but nobody is looking out of the window. Moving quickly and quietly, Zoe runs to the barn. The barn doors are shut, but she opens one and goes inside, then she shuts it again. The red car is standing in the center of the floor. Zoe opens the driver's door and sits in the front. She looks for a phone, but there isn't one. Perhaps I can drive the car, she thinks. I can get Mark, and we can drive into the town and get the police. I've seen Dad and Mum drive. I know I can do it. But there is no key to start the car. Then Zoe hears somebody talking outside. She gets out of the car and goes to the barn door, opening it a little. She looks out and sees the woman and one of the men walking across to the stables. George is angry with you, the woman is saying. When he tells us to do something, he likes us to do it, Harry. Yeah. Okay, you look round the stables, the man says. I'm not going inside with those horses. The woman laughs. I didn't know you were afraid of animals, she says. Only horses, says the man. He doesn't like the woman laughing at him. And you can look for my lighter, he tells her. I think I lost it in the stables. Anything you say, Harry, the woman says, laughing again. Zoe watches the woman go into the stables, and the man walking up and down outside. Some minutes later, she hears somebody shout. The shout comes from inside the stables. It's Mark, thinks Zoe. The woman comes out, pulling Mark behind her. I didn't find your lighter, she tells the man, but I found this boy. She turns to Mark. Are there any other children here? No, says Mark. Only me. Where are your mother and father? Asks Harry. They're at the hospital, says Mark. But they're coming back soon. No, not soon, says the woman, smiling. It's not a nice smile. The roads are flooded. Let's get him into the house, says Harry. They push Mark over to the back door of the farmhouse. "Who's this?" asks George when Petra and Harry come in with the boy. "We found him in the stables," says Petra. "What's your name, boy?" asks George. "Mark," says Mark. He looks round the room. Are they going to kill me? He thinks. "We thought you all went to the hospital," says Andy. "Only Mum and Dad went," says Mark. "Is that right?" says Andy. He comes close and pulls Mark over to him. "Where's your sister?" "Sister," says Mark. "I haven't got a sister." Andy hits him across the face. "Yes, you have. There are 2 bedrooms, and one is full of girls' things." She's away," says Mark. "So you have got a sister," says Harry. Mark doesn't say anything. He doesn't want them to find Zoe. Did she find a phone in the car? He thinks. Are the police coming? Look round the place again, George tells Petra and the 2 men. Leave the boy with me. And bring the money in here. I'll get it, says Harry. He doesn't want to go back to the stables and the horses. I'll look round the other rooms again, says Andy. Be quick, George tells them. Zoe can see Mark in the kitchen with the men and the woman. Are they going to make Mark tell them about me? She thinks. Where can I go? I don't want them to find me. She looks round the barn. Then she looks up at the roof. There is another floor a few meters below the roof. A ladder goes up to a small door, and the door opens onto it. Sometimes Zoe goes up there when she wants to read a book, or to be in a quiet place. Zoe goes up the ladder now. She moves quickly. She can hear somebody coming over to the barn. When she is on the floor above, Zoe looks down and sees the barn door open. Harry comes into the barn and looks round. He doesn't look up at the roof. Then he goes to the car and opens the back door. He starts to take out one of the large black bags, but he hears a sound and stops. What's that? Harry says. Zoe can hear the sound, too. There is a small window in the roof of the barn, and she can see the sky above. And she can see something moving in the sky, too. It's a helicopter. She thinks. Perhaps the people in the helicopter are looking at the trees the storm has blown down. Perhaps they're looking to see if they can help any car drivers or other people in flooded houses. Harry waits in the barn. When the sound of the helicopter dies away, he leaves the black bags near the car and runs across to the house. Petra is running from the stables. That was the police, she shouts to Harry. Zoe hears her. The police? She thinks, looking through the window in the roof of the barn. How can I let them know I'm here? What can I do? New words of Chapter 5. Shut equals to, cause to, close something. Chapter 6. Fire. Petra and Harry run into the house. They all stand without moving, listening to the helicopter flying over the house again. Harry looks out of the window at it. The word police is on the helicopter. They're looking for us, George, says Harry. The woman on the radio said they were. Get away from the window, says George. Do you think they saw the car? Asks Andy. It's in the barn, remember, says Petra. The police can't see through doors. Where's the money? Asks George. In the barn, says Harry. Why didn't you bring it in here? Says George, angrily. I heard the helicopter and was afraid, says Harry. His face goes white, and he quickly moves away from the window. They're looking for us, George. I know they are. The police don't know we're here, Petra tells him. All they can see is a farmhouse, and it's already quite dark. I don't like it, says Harry. Why don't we get away from here? The weather is better now. The roads. We stay here. George tells him. The police know the color of that car. We have to get another. When the boy's mother and father come back from the hospital, we can take their car, says Andy. Yeah, that's right, says George. But tonight we're staying here, says Petra. I'm not driving to London tonight. Perhaps the roads are better, but I'm tired. We're all tired, says George. Zoe is coming quietly down the ladder in the barn. The police are in the helicopter, but they don't know those robbers are here, she thinks. I must tell them. I must make them see that something is wrong. How can I do that? She walks across the barn to the door. Carefully, she looks out. She can see the kitchen window, and the woman and the three men inside the house. She can see Mark sitting on a chair by the table. He's afraid, she thinks. She looks up at the sky. Is the helicopter coming back again soon? What can I do? I know. I can start a fire so that they can see something is wrong. What can I burn? Everything is wet after the storm. Zoe looks round the barn and sees the black bags near the back of the car. She opens one and finds it is full of old and dirty banknotes. The money from the robbery, thinks Zoe. She takes some of the money from the bag and looks at it. The man on the TV said the Bank of England burns old banknotes. She smiles. So why don't I burn them? Working quickly, Zoe pulls two of the black bags out of the door and round to the back of the barn. Then she goes back for the other two. Suddenly, she hears something and looks up at the sky. The helicopter is coming back. She thinks. She can hear the sound getting nearer and nearer. Quickly, Zoe takes Harry's lighter from her jeans. The helicopter is coming back, says Andy in the kitchen. They can't see us, they are too far away, George tells him. Suddenly, Harry shouts, something's burning. Look! There's smoke coming from the back of the barn. Everybody looks out of the window and sees the light and smoke from the fire. Stay with the boy, George tells Petra. The three men run out of the house and round to the back of the barn. Harry sees the black bags. Somebody's burning our money, he shouts. The banknotes are burning well, smoke going up into the sky. George and Harry run across to the burning banknotes, but the fire is too hot and they have to get back again. Nobody sees Zoe running to the house. Her face is hot from the fire. She pushes open the back door. Petra turns quickly. Who are you? She asks Zoe. But Zoe looks at Mark. Are you okay? She asks him. Yes, says Mark, getting off the chair. He is pleased to see his sister. I saw the smoke. What did you do? Zoe smiles. I started a fire. Petra is moving across to her, but Zoe pushes over a chair before the woman gets to her. Run, she shouts at Mark. Then she pulls the table in front of Petra. Mark runs out of the house. Petra tries to stop him, but the boy is too quick for her. She catches Zoe as the girl starts to run to the door. Got you, says Petra, catching Zoe's arm. Zoe kicks the woman hard and pulls herself away. She runs out of the house, looking up at the sky and trying to see the helicopter. Mark is looking up at the sky too. There it is, he shouts. It's getting nearer. George, Harry and Andy don't see Zoe or Mark. They are watching the fire burning. Look at all that money, says Andy. £500,000, says Harry. He wants to cry. George is angry. He wants to kill somebody. But then he has something more important to think about. The helicopter is back, he shouts at the other two. They can see us. Run. The policeman and policewoman in the helicopter see the people running behind the farm buildings. They see a girl and a boy, and 3 men and a woman. The girl and boy are running to the stables. The men and the woman are running across the flooded fields, away from the farmhouse. They are looking up at the helicopter. What's happening down there? Says the policeman flying the helicopter. Something's wrong, says the policewoman. Look. 3 men and a woman. Perhaps it's the security van robbers. Call for some help, says the policeman flying the helicopter. Then let's go down and have a look. Okay, says the policewoman. And she picks up the police radio and starts to talk into it. They're getting away, says Zoe, watching the robbers running through the water. She and Mark are standing outside the stables. They can see George and Petra running across one field, and Harry and Andy running across another. Above them, the police helicopter is coming down slowly. Zoe can see the people inside it. The police can't catch all 4 of the robbers, says Mark. 2 of them are going to get away. They are running through the trees. Zoe thinks for a minute, then she says, no, they're not going to get away. And she runs into the stables and comes out with Topaz. What are you going to do? Asks Mark. Topaz and I are going after the 2 running through the trees, says Zoe. Perhaps the helicopter can't get down there, but we can. Mark watches his sister jump onto the horse. Minutes later, she is following Harry and Andy across the field. Harry sees Zoe and the horse coming after him. Look, he shouts to Andy. Andy turns round to look and runs into a tree. He falls into the water under the tree and doesn't move. Harry tries to get away, but Topaz soon catches him. Stop, shouts Zoe. Harry is afraid of the horse. He stops running and holds up his hands. Okay, okay. I'm not running anymore. You've got me. Don't let that horse get near me. Help your friend to stand up and go back to the farm, Zoe tells him. I'm going to follow you. Harry helps Andy to stand up and they go across the fields, back to the farmhouse. Zoe follows behind them on her horse. 3 police cars are coming fast down the small road next to the fields. The helicopter is flying over George and Petra. The 2 robbers have seen the police cars. "We can't get away," says Petra. George stops running. He is very tired. "I can't run anymore," he says. After a minute, they put up their hands and start to walk over to the road and the police cars. "What happened to Harry and Andy?" George asks Petra. "Did they get away?" Petra looks across to the other field. She sees Harry helping Andy, followed by the girl on the horse. "No," she tells George, "they didn't get away." 15 minutes later, the helicopter is standing behind the barn. The policeman and policewoman from it are talking to Zoe and Mark in the farmhouse. The police cars have gone, taking the 4 robbers with them. "That was clever, making a fire for us to see," the policeman says to Zoe. "It was lucky I had money to burn," laughs Zoe. New words of Chapter 6. Run out of equals to, cause to, close something. Have a look equals to look at something. Hold up equals to raise your hand. Clever equals having intelligence in doing something. The end.